Welcome everyone to the Monday afternoon Roundtable. Today we got all three of the Munday brothers here. We're going to talk about a really good friend of ours that we loved and cherished throughout our life, our dad, James Pep, P-E-P Munday. And Dad was a law enforcement officer, as we've talked about in previous podcasts. He was a law enforcement officer for many, many years. But his life, for the most part, dealt with alcohol beverage control or revenue type officer in a little county where we were from. And he's got a rich history and a lot to talk about, but we just kind of wanted to bring him up and put him on the spotlight today. We've had a couple people ask us about the photographs, because back in the day, Jason and his family, they made a scrapbook and put things together. A couple people have seen that, and they said, well, why don't you do a podcast on your dad, because he had such an interesting life. We probably only knew 10% of what went on, just what we could see when he come home. But I've got Tim and Jason with me today, and so we're just going to go back in time a little bit and talk about our dad. So I hope you enjoy it. Jason?
Yeah, and today's podcast is just going to be a small, like David was saying, this is going to be a small portion of who our dad was. We don't have a lot of pictures involving other things other than his career. This is more career-oriented, but just to talk about, he was a loving husband, loving father, loving grandfather. He never...
Great-grandfather.
He loved his grandkids more than he loved us.
That's true.
And I don't mean that bad. And he loved little kids. Like it didn't matter if he was grandkids or not. If a little kid come over, it was like Santa Claus. He just would always, want to give them candy or be nice to them or high five, whatever. Talk to them. But he was a good guy all around. But we're just going to do a small portion about his career today.
And really nothing is we've not prepared for this. We're just shooting off the hip, and we're going to go, and hopefully you'll like it.
Yeah. Plus, he was a badass, too, back in the day. And even up until his later years, especially with the three of us and two daughters, and like I said, a couple of grandsons and things of that nature. But he's just, he was a man's man. And law enforcement was in his blood, and he just, we carried that on with our careers. But let's get into it. James Pep Munday. That's one of the last pictures of him. Mm-hmm. We all got together and took a few pictures, but that was one of my favorites right there of Dad.
That picture right there, I had it in one of my apartments before I got married, and an officer that worked with me, Dwight Sheehan, come by and visited me one day, and he saw that picture. He says, "Is that your dad?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "What is he, a judge or something? He looks important." Or is he a senator or something? He said he looks real distinguished. Yeah, distinguished looking. And I said, "Well, no, but he is distinguished."
Yeah, Dad's military service. He served in Korea from 1953 to, was that right?
No, he got 52, 53.
Oh, excuse me. Well, he got drafted earlier and was in a car crash in South Carolina, broke his leg, so he had to extend his draft. And I think he was hoping that the war would end, and it was pretty close, but he got drafted there at the end and served most of his military career in Korea.
He said they gave him exactly 1 year to the day.
Did they?
Yeah, his extension was 1 year to the day to report back to.
And he was in the infantry division. What division was he in? The
Cavalry, wasn't it?
Cavalry, excuse me, yes. I always like that picture there because he's got that bright smile, and he's just, that's a dad right there. So, anyhow. Tim, I'll let you talk about that one.
That picture was a 1965-66 era. That was taken in front of the Granite Falls Police Department. We've got, I can't see them on the small screen. I used to could name every person in that picture. Chief Rusty Barlow, Joe Munday, Dad, Howard Kazai, Perk Warlick. Chief Duffy was the fire chief in the white shirt. Miss Brady was one of the
school crossing guards.
Yeah, I don't know the other lady's name. And what was this guy lived on?
Tig. Hal Tig or Tig?
It wasn't Hal, but he was a Tig.
He was a Tig, yeah.
I can't remember. And who's the gentleman, the radio dispatcher in the corner with the hat on, looked like Otis?
That's hard because I.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't recognize him. And Perk Warlick's in the middle. Is that correct?
Correct.
He was our neighbor. He was a radio dispatcher on the second shift at the police department for many, many years. Everyone up here in this town, Granite Falls was a mill town, textile mills. And as you can see, the police department was fairly small. And the two school crossing guards, Miss Triplett was her name.
Triplet.
Yeah.
You're right.
And went to school with her daughter. And Miss Brady went to school with her daughter as well.
And son.
Yeah. And both good, great people. But anyhow, all these officers, the town was probably, what was the population? Granted, at the time, probably 1,500 people.
Yeah.
Maybe. But they all worked at the mill, the cordage mill. And so,
I think everybody in that photo's passed away, with the exception of Chief Duffy. He was the fire chief at the time.
I thought he had died, has he not?
I think he's still living.
Okay. Yeah, all the rest of them are gone, but that was 1965, you think?
Yeah.
And Daddy told me, and I'm sure he told you guys, that Chief Barlow come and recruited him. Daddy was working at Shuford Mills as a foreman, maybe.
Yeah.
And Chief Barlow come and said, "Hey, I got an opening for a police officer. I think you'd be good. Do you want to do that?" And then that's where.
Yeah.
And notice the white hats. That was the style back then. And plus, the good thing is when you're wearing a white hat, you're easily seen.
Mm-hmm.
They had did they have the light blue uniforms then?
Yeah.
And that was common too. And Daddy was probably one of the younger officers.
He was, but I'm thinking, I'm going to correct, I think it's pre-65 because he was on the ABC board.
68 is when he went.
He went 68.
I think that's about 65 or 66. I think you're right.
And if people realize Chief Barlow is the granddad of Eric Church.
Correct.
And that is where the song Chief.
And he wears his badge. If you
Yeah.
noticed in about
Yeah.
every concert I've ever seen, he wears his grandfather's badge, especially when he sings that song Chief. And he's
Yeah.
got an album called
Yeah.
Chief. So, which kind of is a lot of history there. But all those people were like, our family members. We would go to the police department. I remember when Dad went to the police department. I remember him wearing that police uniform home. I was probably 5. 5 years old when he went. 4. And it was just, I was amazed that our daddy was a policeman. And the funny part, I remember starting the first grade, getting to go to school in a police car. He took me in his police uniform, walked me and my little happy ass to the first grade in Miss Fagerston's room. And I was as proud as a peacock. And nobody messed with Dave Munday after that because they knew my dad was a cop. And it was just a big deal. That's a newer picture of the Granite Falls Police Department.
Photo was taken last week.
Oh, was it? Okay. Well, back in the day, this was all glass. Back in the day, and a little more history. Chief Barlow, I was working at Hickman Hardware while I was in high school, my senior year. He walks in one day at the hardware to buy something. He goes, "I need a dispatcher. You ready to come to work?" I went to my boss man and said, putting my notice in, "I'm going to work at the police department." And it was the best thing I did because I was going to the started community college right during that same time after I graduated. But went to work at the police department right out of high school. And I learned more sitting in that dispatch room on third shift. I would read, I would watch, I would review, I would do reports for them. Jason, I even went out and did backup calls because they had no backup. And me, how old was I? 18 at the time? I'd jump in a police car. I know they do that now and the world would end. But back then we had to because there was no help. And there might have been 1 or 2 deputies and they may have been in Blowing Rock or Collettsville or wherever. And it was just the way we worked, the way we rolled. And it was those officers would come in and teach me and tell me what they did. And we had some really good police officers at that time. And I enjoyed it. But my buddies would come up. All this was glass. This where this little bitty window is. Big glass window.
They were 2 glass doors.
Yeah, it was all glass in the front. They would come up at 3 o'clock in the morning and be out drunk, playing and partying with their girls. And they'd come. They said, "Let's go see David at the police department." Well, they would scare me. They would stick their heads. I'd be working and I'd look around. There would be 3 heads looking in the window. It'd scare me to
A
death.
little further back than that, these 2 squares were bay doors for the fire
That's
department.
correct. Yep.
When that
police
building was
department
built,
went in the
it
back.
was a police department and fire department, and to the right was all the town chambers.
Yeah, it was a beautiful building. Still is. Built in 1938. Thought it was older than that, but I see the marking up there.
Why don't y'all talk about this too? That building. Correct me if I'm wrong, but was Granite Falls Police not one of the last police departments to have a holding cell or
Yes.
like a drunk tank like where you could hold somebody sober.
Still there.
Yeah, but that they actually used it.
Used it up until 84 because the town had to pay so much money to put the cameras and the everything that met code for it to be a jail.
It was really like an Andy Griffin
Yeah.
cell.
How
It was
long?
old time.
And the magistrate was there for several. How long? When was the last magistrate on site?
The magistrate was there all the way up into the 80s,
Yes.
late 80s. But at night they had to go to Lenore after a certain time. And Caldwell County is a pretty good sized county, and it's mostly rural. And so Granite Falls is in the very southern portion of the county, near the Catawba County. So
It would take you an hour to arrest somebody
or more.
Yeah, and process and take them to Lenore.
Let's flip to the next slide there. I love these photographs. These three are my favorites right here. Dad was, we had a little local town newspaper, Granite Falls Press, and Tim went to school with the editor or the owner's son, so we had a little connection through them. But hell, Dad got his picture in the paper about once a week, it seemed like, because that was big news back in the day. But as you can see in these photographs, the one on the far left, Jason and I laughed because looking at this picture, it looks like the back of our house when we were growing up. But it's not. It's built on the same scale. But they were bringing, these were jugs that they were going to use. Milk jugs they were going to use for White Lightning to put whiskey or liquor in. And that's a lot of jugs there to be filled up. But this was part of the stash after they found the steel. This is when Dad went to sworn in as an ABC officer. He was a police officer, as we said, then went in as the ABC officer. Each county, if they had an ABC store, they had an ABC officer. But that was pre-alcohol law enforcement of the state.
Correct.
So they kind of did statewide. They worked together, all the ABC officers, and you'll see in a lot of these photographs, there's ABC officers from Morganton, Catawba County, all over. And they were just a big network of guys. And we grew up with their families, too. Bob DeVinny, Bob Blevins. Remember him? He was with ATF.
Yeah.
They all worked together. There's a couple pictures in your scrapbook of Bob. And I'd like to see if because he was the youngest of them all. Officer DeVinny died, and we're still friends with his family. Go back to that one slide, Tim, just a minute to that. Go hit that other ear back. Yeah. The bootlegger's biggest job relates to ABC officer, meaning that was what they did back in that time. Instead of working at the ABC store doing security and things, hell, they went out and arrested bootleggers and worked with alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. Daddy worked a lot of cases. Wilkes, Alexander, Caldwell, Burke, Lincoln. He worked all over. And he would get calls at night. I remember back then the phone would ring at 3 o'clock in the morning, and it would be an informant, usually a bootlegger's wife, that would call and say, he's drinking and he's getting his liquor here, and then we got a still here and whatever. And for you folks that don't know what a still is, it's the way they made moonshine back in the day. And it's a nasty, nasty process. And I didn't realize that until Dad would bring some of these stills that they would destroy. And I remember Dad would carry the blasting caps, and Bob DeVinny would carry, or DeVinny or one of the others would carry the dynamite in their car. They would carry it separately. And they would blow these damn steels up, but I never got to see them blow a steel up.
He never would let us go on blast day.
I wanted to see that. I really did. But
Something that's amazing, though, about the newspaper article talks about Dad, but then it gives his home address, with something they'll never do. He lives at this address. Had
he lived there up till he died. That was and Mother still lives there. But anyhow, it was just kind of gives a history of him, who he's married to and stuff. But that's the way it was in Granite Falls. Real personable. And anyhow, I'm gonna let Tim and Jason talk about this, but I want to add to the middle one in the end. We'll go ahead.
Yeah, I guess the first photograph is a weekend of bootleg joints being raided, and they have their evidence there. And you have to keep the evidence until it's through in court, and then you'll take it to the landfill and destroy it. But it looked like, can you read who that is with Daddy there?
It was I think it's the one from Catawba County. Was it Ratcliffe?
Yeah.
Does that sound right?
Yes, it's Ratcliffe, yes. Yeah.
Ivan,
the Russian. We called him the Russian. And he was funny as hell. But anyhow, it was non-tax paid whiskey. It was where they had these little liquor joints. Shot houses, yeah. And this was during the 60s and the early 70s, but they had, 60s actually, probably. and they'd go in and raid these liquor houses. The one in the middle, I'm gonna let Tim and Jace talk about that one in a minute, but that's one of my favorites. Dad's got a side profile looking at a big marijuana plant, which I just love that picture, because back then marijuana was the drug that was going to kill us all. And who would have thunk it? But
and in the article it talks about the plant after they seized it from a raid. They put it on display at the Granite Press lobby.
I remember all of us
which is
kids.
across the street from the
Police department.
and they kept it in the window so
He'd water it. Clennard would water it.
Yeah.
But I often wondered what happened to it afterwards. Did Maurice get it?
I wonder what happened to it.
Did Clennard take it, or Daddy go back and get it, or what? It was funny.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. But it was in a 5-gallon bucket. I remember that. And they kept the thing growing for the longest time because it got the sun from the window. But everybody would come and say, there's a marijuana plant over here. But anyhow, they got more than that one, but that was the one that Dad. But later on in life, Tim and I were involved in a lot of marijuana raids where, hell, the marijuana was 15, 16 feet tall. Over in Dudley Shoals and Grace Chapel, and we'd go and cut it down and work all day. It was like harvesting tobacco, and just to get those marijuana plants out of there. But it was a big crop, and it was kind of the change from the bootlegger days, the White Lightning. They weren't making any profit on that like they once did, because it was all kind of regulated.
The price of sugar went so high it cut a lot of bootlegging out.
Yeah, and the risk. I mean, he had people like Dad out there busting their ass every time they turned around. But then the marijuana industry took off, and it was part of my generation, part of Tim's generation, and that's what we kind of grew up with. And it's just ironic and funny to see that. The picture over here on the far right is Dad's old. Is that a Plymouth, Tim? I believe it is.
That's a Ford.
Ford, okay.
How big the
Ford
trunk
beer.
is.
Plymouth
72 Ford.
72 Ford. It's green, I think, but that thing would fly. And when I don't know if it was before that one. I think I was older in that one. But one of the first cars he had, Rick Anderson, James Jett, a bunch of my buddies, we'd all go out and play in his patrol car. When he was gone, he'd leave his car there, but he drove it mostly everywhere he went. Took us places in it because that was his mode of transportation, and he was on call 24/7. But we'd go out and turn the siren on and shit. And there was a time or two that I drove him around the block. I'd drive him around the block with it. But
That was the first car in our family that had air conditioning.
it sure was.
Was Dad's patrol car.
And he kept it clean. He had the radio in it, the blue lights, old blue lights in the grill or something.
The first car I remember riding in, it may have been that one. It was green. I just remember it was green, and it had the long bench seat, and it had the Motorola radio. And I thought my earliest memory of riding in a car was that. And I thought all cars had a Motorola radio in it, because that was our family car.
I know, right?
And I remember getting in another car, and I'm like, well, where's the radio at? But going back, one more thing about the marijuana, we got a first cousin that was a police chief at Granite, and he come by one day and had a bunch of Dad's old search warrants for the liquor steals and stuff like that. And I remember reading them, and they're basically the same format and wording that I used when I was a narcotics detective.
Did you get them? Did he give them to you?
Somebody's got them.
I hope he's kept them.
I don't know where they're at.
I didn't know. And that was the thing, working at the police department at night. I'd go through the old records and see stuff.
See, these were 30 and 40 years old then, but it was the same, and they were typed on a typewriter, which amazes me that Daddy could type on a typewriter. But you had to put it in, line it up with the old. It wasn't computer like I'm used to, but it was the same format.
Tammy's never used a typewriter, has he?
I don't know if he got who to use. I mean,
the typewriter, we had to, everybody had to.
I learned on a typewriter.
Well, I did back in school.
Yeah.
In high school, my senior year, walked in the office, and the principal, Bill Metcalf, he knew exactly what I wanted to be. He knew I wanted to follow my dad's footsteps. He said, "You had typing class?" I said, "No, sir. I'm going to be a highway patrolman." He said, "Get your ass down there and get a typing book." Because it was the end of the year, and I said, okay. I went and got a typing. He said, also get one of those old typewriters. And he gave me that typewriter and that typing book and told me to learn to type. And I halfway did on my own. And thank God I did, because he recognized that's the way it was going to be. I said, well, they handwrite everything. And they did when I came on. But eventually it all went to computers, of course, and typing. This photograph's one of my favorites as well. All of them are my favorite. But this one's kind of cool because it's got a story behind it. It was an underground steal, is that right?
It was under a chicken coop.
Yeah, chicken houses were big, or are big in this area still, and we were just talking about some of them earlier. But This one, the front was a legitimate chicken house, and underneath it they had the liquor still. But the thing with the liquor still, you have to have water source, and you got to have a fire. You got to have to heat and water.
Ventilation.
And ventilation, of course. But they had all that there, and it was kind of, back in the day, that was pretty slick. I'm saying that picture was probably made in 68 or 69 based on the dress of the way the guy's dressed here. And I don't know who that gentleman is.
I don't either. I don't know him.
Who's
He's
who
the
the
younger
other?
guy. I can't tell who either of them are. That's not Dad, I don't think.
Dad's
either.
the one with the back to us, right?
No, the one with the back to us, ATF. He's out of Hickory.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyhow, that's underground. Damn if I'd have gone underground that place. But you can see all the 5-gallon buckets. That's how they would put the sour mash or whatever they were using, the corn, and move it from place to place. And usually a still, when they would find them, there was a slick path from the barn or from the water source to the still, and that would kind of give it away a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times they were booby trapped.
Oh,
These
yeah.
stills were, because there's big money, and this is a lot going on. This photograph, this is Dad and Ralph Barlow. Rusty Barlow was his name, the chief of police there at Granite Falls. They were both named to the Law Enforcement Association, North Carolina and South Carolina Law Enforcement Association. Since that time, it's changed just to North Carolina, and then South Carolina's got their own. In my career, I was an executive member of the North Carolina Police Execs Association, which is the same group. I think this picture, Tim, was taken in South,
Either Hilton Head or
Hilton Head, I think.
But that Dad's number for the association was 79. Did y'all know that?
No, I did not.
79.
It's pretty cool.
And now they're into millions.
like 79th member.
Yeah.
Okay.
They were on, the chartered.
So-
members.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's just a neat picture right there of all
His
of them.
card, I remember seeing his card, and my card was like 2 million, his was 79.
I'm standing corrected. That picture was taken in High Point. That conference was in High Point. I see it on the thing here now. But anyhow, I love that picture. Dad's in the back middle somewhere there, and then Chief Barlow's in there. I couldn't recognize. If I had time and really looked at this picture, I'd probably tell you some of those folks. But that's many years ago. So anyhow, he was proud of that. Tim, you took this picture, right?
Yeah.
This is at the Caldwell County Sheriff's Department at the end of Dad's career. All right, I'm gonna get into a little personal part here. When I was with the Highway Patrol, and I come home one weekend or one day, and I look, and there's damn news vans in front of our house from the local Charlotte News, and it scared me. I said, "What's going on?" Pull in, and Dad worked at the police department at that time because he'd ended his career with ABC, and he was just getting his time, I think, was what he was doing. And he was working at the police department. There was some big controversy. And I don't even want to go into all the controversy, but it was all politics, I believe, dealing with a lot of the people in the municipal government. And long story short, several of them left the police department, Dad being one of them, in protest, sort of. He, once he got something on his mind, and if he felt he was right, he didn't back up. He kept moving forward, and he would fight for what he thought was right. And that's what he was doing in this case. Whether it was right or wrong, I don't really know all the story. There's a kind of a big story behind all of it. And there's been a book written about some of it. But long story short, again, he left, and several of the officers left. They all went to the sheriff's office. The sheriff there, Bliff Benfield, was our friend. I'd worked there. Tim worked there. You worked there. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Yes. And so
You didn't work for Bliff, though, did you?
did you not?
No.
I thought you did. I thought you
No.
did. Okay. Bliff was the sheriff when I was there, and the sheriff when Tim was there, and Dad. And he was just good to us. I mean, he didn't have to hire any of us, but he did. And it built our careers, I think, the time we were there. But Dad worked, he didn't want to work the road. He just wanted to work detention and kind of stay behind the scenes, which he did. But that's where he's sitting at the jail entry process there, and Tim come in and took his picture. But I love that picture because that's his face. Like, what do you want?
Yeah.
What's going on?
Well, and Tim's got a badge. You had worn it, Daddy wore it, Tim had worn it, and he let me wear it when I worked at the sheriff's office. And then when we left there, I gave it back. You still got the badge that all four of us
Well, cool. I didn't
got
know
to
that
wear
story.
the same badge.
Well, good. You still have it?
Yeah.
Good. I love that picture because that's in the old jail. Of course, they've got a new, nice detention center now, but that's the old, and it was Gothic.
And-
that was old.
And Daddy would, I was probably I wasn't a teenager yet, but I wasn't a little kid. And they would, the inmates or the people in custody would always, they had their own stuff and they would sell it. Like Daddy asked me one day, he said, "You want a radio?" I said, "Yeah." And the next day he come home with a little radio. He said he paid the inmate $4 or $5.
God almighty.
for it.
Yeah, it wouldn't happen today.
Yeah, I know. And because they have their property, they get to keep it. And then they would, he'd come home and put, like some of the inmates would draw him a picture and he'd put it on the refrigerator with a,
Yeah.
but like it would be just, the ones that were good inmates liked him and the ones that weren't didn't like him. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, he was hot or cold. I mean, if he liked you, he liked you. If he didn't, you knew it
But he was
right
good
away.
to the ones that were good.
He was. He
You know,
treated all of them well.
Yeah.
Man.
He gave everybody a chance. Is
He
what-
sure did. But I saw him get rough with a couple of them too. But
Mm.
it was a funny time. Yeah, this is a great picture here of all of us. That's Dad in the middle. This is our nephew Matt, our sister's son. He was a North Carolina probation and parole officer. Jason's on the far end. You were 12 at that time.
Yeah, I had hair then.
Yeah. Dang. What year was this? I don't know.
1998.
98?
98.
Yep.
Tim was with the sheriff's department. He was a lieutenant. And then I was a lieutenant with the highway patrol, and we're all there. I just love this picture. We did several. It was professionally done, but a couple of them were looking really stern and mean. But I like this one because we're all laughing and smiling, and that's Dad couldn't even look mean in the mean shots. He's got a little grin on him
Yeah.
because he was so proud to be there with all of us.
It was a surprise.
It was. He didn't know it.
And Mama didn't know it either, remember?
No, Tim's the one that kind of set it up,
Mhm.
and I just love that picture, and I get more comments in my office from people would come in and they'd see that photograph. They said, "Well, you know your brothers," and I said, "Well, your dad and your nephew." And Rich is not in that picture. Our cousin, all right, he's our first cousin. He went on to be the chief of police there at Granite Falls, and why we didn't, and that's my fault, I guess, because we kind of put it all together pretty quick. But I wished he would have been in the photograph. It would have added a little bit to it. The one on the right is the whole damn family. I think is that all of us? Yep.
Yeah.
Jason, me, Dad, Mother, Terry, Pam, and Tim, and we're at the War Memorial in Granite Falls, which is kind of like the wall, the Vietnam Wall in Washington D.C. They put a memorial together. Who sponsored that in Granite? The Rotary? No.
I don't know. It may have been the Lions Club or somebody, but that's all military from
Service.
Granite Falls.
Yeah, I mean it's got from World War I to Vietnam or Korea, Vietnam. I think as far as it went, because it might have been the Iraq conflict, might have been on there. I don't know. But Dad's name's on there. Tim got all that, and we got his name up, and we all went down one day and took a picture. So it's unusual that we all together at one time, especially with our sisters. But we were all able to get together. Little Mom's there in the middle. So Dad's like, "Let's get this over with." It was cold that day. I think he
But
wanted to go home.
it was a big deal to him.
He
though,
enjoyed it, and
Yeah.
he loved it, and he liked having his name up there. So I thought it was pretty cool. Let's go to the next slide. We got another one? I don't know if we do or not.
This one.
Okay. Well, let's finish this up. But in closing, we loved our dad, and we followed his footsteps, and I knew right out of high school that's what I wanted to do, was be a law enforcement officer, and Tim same way, and Jason followed it. Do we have regrets? Probably, maybe, as far as our financial outcomes, but I loved it, and I don't have any regrets for the most part. I may have done some things a little differently in my career, but every time I would do something on the road, especially in dealing with an impaired driver or somebody, drugs, any kind of case, I'd always think back, well, how would Daddy handle it? How would he do it? Or how would he treat this individual? And it just, I always looked back towards him and tried to follow his career. I never heard anything bad about Dad and people that he had arrested or anything like that. Everything was pretty positive. We'd run into people and he'd say, "Yeah, your dad arrested me back in the day," or whatever. But I think he treated people with respect and the way they should be treated. But I miss him. He's been gone several years now, but he lived a good, strong, hard life and loved his family, as you said, Jason, and his grandkids. And it's been fun talking about him. I'm going to let Tim and Jason close it out. But again, this was something we decided to do, put a little podcast together just about him, and because, that's who we are.
I just want to reiterate a couple of things about, he always told me to treat everybody with respect. Even the people you're arresting, let them know you respect them no matter what. I mean, do what you got to do, but don't demean anybody. And he always taught us to do what was right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think all three of us have done that. I know we have. I mean, it's our history. And each one of us carries certain traits from him. We share some of the same traits, and some traits David might just have, or I might have, or Tim might just have.
That's true.
But I can see Daddy in all of us, even the girls. I don't mean that like they're second class, because that's not what I mean. But I can see the way they do their jobs. I can see how Daddy influenced them, and it's really neat with us working together, because he's the catalyst to that. Even though he's not here, he is here. So.
And Jason was saying a while ago, we were in our office this morning looking at this stuff. He said, "Damn, you look just like Daddy when he was younger." I hope that's what you meant.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
He always told me, he said, you can't arrest them all in one night.
No.
And they'll always be there. You'll get
They'll
them
mess
the
up
next
again.
time.
There'll be another day.
Yeah.
Another time, another day.
That's it.
And I've used that before with some of my clients and attorneys. I say, in doing other cases, I say, they could have waited to another day instead of jumping the gun and making an arrest before they had a solid case or whatever. This guy or girl's going to mess up again.
And going to that, something just hit me. He had several cases that went to federal court. And he would tell me, always make sure your case is just not probable cause. Make sure you got enough to convict the person.
Before you ever go.
You have everything.
Right.
Before you make that arrest, make sure you got it. It's a conviction.
Mm-hmm. And I don't ever remember him losing any cases. I mean, most of his cases were settled. And because they were solid, he would build the case from the ground up. He would take the information from the informant or whatever. He would follow it up. He'd do surveillance. Then he'd bust their ass. He'd make the arrest, and he would gather the evidence the way it was supposed to be gathered. And it was a fun life as a kid to watch and grow up being around. Like you said, Jason, hell, that's all I knew.
Yeah.
So anyhow, we're going to close this one out. It's been fun talking about Dad. We usually close each one of our segments with what we call the last call, where we review an alcoholic beverage of our choice, and mostly a bourbon or a whiskey, but we're going to also do malt beverages and vodka and different things. But we can't do it today because
we're all going to practice qualifying for our upcoming firearms qualification.
Yeah, the range master wouldn't like, 3.
No alcohol on the range.
And we'd never do that, of course. And that's why we're not going to do last call today. We did, however, have a get-together the other night with a lot of friends. We had a band come in downstairs on the street. So we invited some of our close friends up, and we did a couple last calls, maybe 3, that night. But according to our producer, Garrett Munday, he's not going to be able to air most of it because we started a little too late. But it was fun. We drank different bourbons, and they were all really, really good. But next week we'll do a last call again, and we'll pop the top on a new one and break the seal, and see what it tastes like, and we'll talk about it. But the last call I enjoy that part the best. It's fun. So, any closing?
I just want to let our podcast listeners know we've talked a lot about the pictures, and I know you can't see that when you're listening just to the podcast only. So tune into our YouTube channel where you can see the PowerPoint presentation with it. And the pictures go a long way, not just with the talking. So check out our YouTube channel. It is Monday Afternoon Roundtable, and Munday is spelled Munday, the way we spell our last name. It's kind of a play on words.
Yeah.
But check that out, because the pictures are, are worth a million words or whatever, that old saying.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I'll give it to Tim in just a minute, but if anybody out there wants to be a guest on our show or wants to talk about anything, feel free to email me at the email address david@bluelineadvantage.com, and we'll respond to any questions you may have. We've got a little bit of feedback from our previous podcast talking about what we talked about and listened to our little stories and stuff. But anybody that has a question or a concern or a complaint, whatever they want to talk about, we'll be glad to bring it up. But we are going to have guests on the show. We got a few people lined up, and I think you'll enjoy all of them.
A lot of people have gave us ideas that don't want to be on the podcast. And that's fine too, if they, bounce it off of us, and we'll build one on that. But just contact us. And we've got a bunch of ideas in line that we're going to be bringing people in, and each week have a new guest and a new topic.
And it's fun. We go back into history and we talk about things, and we talk about our careers. We talk about what we're doing now. And it's pretty cool that as a family we can sit up here and do this, and we all halfway get along, and we enjoy each other's company. We work together. We talk about cases. We enjoy our work, and we're just, as we said in the first podcast, this is the second chapter of our careers, and we're going to make the best of it. So hope you all enjoyed it, and look forward to seeing you all next week. Till then, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.